Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Will in Southern Illinois. Hypothetical, if there had been a major personal
or
rift,
even hypothetically.
Well, he just wrote hypothetical with a semicolon. If there had been a major personal rift between Hogan and Vince in the mid-'80s, say mid-1986 after WrestleMania 2, which led to Hogan leaving the WWF for the NWA, what would be the more likely outcome? Option 1. Hogan and the NWA turn the tide and win the promotional war of the 1980s, and WWF fades from its position of power and prominence. Or B. Vince uses his already substantial national platform to get someone else over in the top spot, and the WWF still wins the war, despite short-term setbacks.
Well, can we go for option 3? Hogan goes crazy because Dusty's booking him, and Dusty won't book him like Hulk Hogan. Dusty gets frazzled with Hogan because he is not used to hearing "that doesn't work for me, brother." Flair's willing to do whatever, but the fans, especially in the Carolina base territory, boo Hogan out of the building and refuse to take him as a babyface because he symbolizes everything that they already didn't like about WWF wrestling.
Well, let me stop you right there. Does Hulk Hogan already generate that kind of reaction in 1986? He was not yet as hammy and as cartoony as he would be. He was still relatively fresh on the national stage. Does he already at that point in 86 get that kind of reaction from the Crockett fans?
I think in some cases, yes, because, I mean, look at what was going on and I'm not talking about in Philadelphia and Baltimore. It would have made a huge difference. Anywhere else that Crockett expanded, but in the core Carolina territory, which was still the majority of the business at that point in time, Greensboro doing $100,000 gates, Charlotte doing $100,000 gates. How would you have done that? Hogan had to be a babyface, but if he came in and worked with Flair as the champion and Flair was the heel, the people would have still cheered for Flair because they would have seen Hogan as the outsider. And you know how those people were about Flair. Dusty talked to them and appealed to them on that visceral NWA level, and not to say your prayers, take your vitamins. Hogan would have had to change his whole fucking thing, which may then have changed what made him Hulk Hogan.
But do you think like 1983 Hogan would have gotten over in Mid-Atlantic, wouldn't he have? In the AWA? Like if you take that Hogan and just drop him in Mid-Atlantic?
I think, well, but then he's being booked by Dusty. And then you've got the Flair was a special case that Dusty could coexist at the top with, right?
For a while.
Now you've got Hogan in that mix, and Hogan knows the way that he stays over is to be dominant and invulnerable, and that's why Vince was his perfect promoter and the perfect way to book Hogan, the perfect way to push him. But then does he come in as a babyface? Does he dismantle Ric Flair when Dusty's been trying and failed? Do you immediately put the belt on him over Flair and risk the blowback from the Carolinas fans? Or do you bring him in as the gimmick attraction and Dusty and Flair are still fighting over the belt? Or you can't make him a heel. That means, does Dusty become partners with Hulk Hogan? How does Hulk Hogan feel about that? Or in one of the group of the superpowers? Instead of Dusty and Magnum and the Road Warriors, it's Dusty and the Road Warriors and Hulk Hogan. Dusty had a different booking philosophy. It was more traditional, old school, and to keep himself and his main antagonist above the rest of the fray for the most part, except when rock and roll got hot, Road Warriors got hot, then you had six-mans with Dusty and them against Flair and the Horsemen. Hogan needed to be concentrated on. It's just those three guys with Dusty booking in the Carolinas of 1986 or the NWA of 1986, it wouldn't have worked out like it did for everybody more beneficially. And then would Dusty then have have either left and gone to work for Vince, or would Flair have left and gone to work for Vince?
And Hogan needs the belt. You couldn't have Hogan chase the belt at that point.
Yeah, that's what they're just, it's not even sometimes about the talent, it's about the lay of the land. Not only what the fans are used to, but who's involved in the office and who's on the roster. And so you cannot have 3 ultimate fucking heroes.
Well, the other thing, too, is if Dusty had him, again, this is all hypothetical, he would be able to get him in and out a lot, because I'm guessing Hogan would have gone back to his New Japan deal if he had left the WWF.
Well, maybe not, because maybe he wanted to. Maybe Crockett said, well, we're going to have you fucking exclusively, since we're just pulling all this out of our ass. I don't know.
Do you see any way that Crockett, let's say this comes up in 87. Is there any way Crockett could have done, although it's a different relationship and he owns his own company, could have done kind of what Bischoff did and gone to Ted Turner and said, hey, we have a chance to get Hogan. Is there any way you could put some money in? It'll mean ratings for your network to help us get Hogan. Do you think there's any way that the relationship was there already?
Yeah, for something like that, yeah. He could have gone and said that easily. I would think. Maybe he might not have got Ted on the phone first try, but he could have run it up the fucking chain of command. Because then you would, okay, Hulk Hogan, his new home on national television is now on TBS Superstation. They would have got into that. But then, like I said, what do you do with everybody? Sometimes all those major players can't coexist. What about if you tried to put Mick Jagger and Robert Plant in either the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin? Would it work? Even if you're adding major star power, sometimes when you mess up the chemical equation of shit that worked and was working, you fuck it up. I think Hogan, if he'd have left the WWF, had been the stupidest thing he ever did in 1986. And I don't know whether he would have worked to near that level in the NWA, even if he had been pushed, because it was different surroundings in a different place. And the NWA of 1986 was a lot different than WCW of 1996. There, Hogan fit in.
If you get Hogan, who do you program him with? Do you go right to Flair, or do you go to Nikita?
Well, that's another thing. Nikita Koloff was built up as a ruthless Russian nightmare and a monster. So yes, Hogan could drop the leg on him in 7 minutes, and that would sure get Hogan over. But then it made everybody else that had either been beaten by Nikita, or it took them 20, 30 minutes, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, whatever, to beat Nikita. With you're blending styles and colors and chemicals that didn't necessarily go together. There have been multiple cases over the years of a guy drawing incredible record-setting money in one place and bombing in another place because of a different makeup of not only the company and the style of wrestling they promoted, but the fan base. So I'm not saying Hogan in 1986 would have been big anywhere, but it would have not worked out to everybody's satisfaction like it did the way it happened if they'd started moving around. And Vince would have put somebody else in that spot, and it would have been Hulk Hogan. So he would have suffered also. Crockett may have got a short-term boost, but then at what price to his in-ring style, which would have had to been changed around quite a bit to cater to Hogan, which is why that Hogan was perfect for, and he brought all the people in that he could work with and that he'd like to work with up there. And then do the fans react negatively to the entire style of the promotion changing for Hogan, because that was the reason why they were watching the NWA to begin with, because it wasn't the WWF, because that was the showbiz stuff. We've heard that testimony from every fucking fan that ever went to any of those matches. The NWA people went because they thought that it was kind of the real stuff, or the realer stuff, or the more adult stuff. and the WWF fans like the gimmicks and the characters and the showbiz.